in the house. On today's broadcast, we're going to be focusing on food politics. One of my favorite topics, of course, nutrition. What we're going to be discussing is how food politics, and in particular, why junk food is so prevalent in our society and all the implications that it causes with regards to disparities in health. So welcome. Again, if you've forgotten who you're listening to today, we're on AM Hot News Talk Radio. This is AM 1240. If you want to go ahead and call in, we are taking live calls throughout this segment. The phone number to call in live is 423-800-8949. I will be fielding questions with regards to the topic of discussion today, which is food politics. And if you want to follow us on live stream, if the radio signal there is not allowing you to actually hear the whole broadcast, you can certainly go to www.hotnewstalkradio.com, and we're there on live stream as well. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and certainly comment on what's going on and give us tips about local news as it's happening. So today I want to start off first about food politics. And so one of the things, if you're brand new to my show, one of the things that I want to preface today's conversation with is that I'm a family medicine physician as well as board certified sports medicine physician. And I practice at my own clinic here, the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. And my practice is very different in the way that I actually approach healthcare. My philosophy on healthcare and the way that I interact with patients is I'm trying to extract from our current model of medicine, which is what I call a sick care model of medicine. The sick care model, very briefly, is a model that does not really engender and put the primary focus on true prevention. It's really Band-Aids, if you will. Here's your prescription. You get less than 5 minutes of face-to-face time with your physician, and boom, out the door. Sometimes you don't even see your physician. Sometimes you wait months and months and months to see your physician. So what I really have tried to focus on in my practice is having people really focus on what is the long-term solution. And long-term solutions oftentimes help us look at what is causing the problems in the first place. So one of our biggest issues I think that our nation is facing is the obesity epidemic. And this is not only, I think, an epidemic. I think when we start looking at nations worldwide, this is becoming a pandemic. So a lot of times I think that obesity just gets reduced down to that's somebody that's just overweight and that's their problem. It's not just their problem. This is everybody's problem. And I want to really take this from a compassionate standpoint. Having been somebody, I openly share this with the public and my patients. I used to be classified as morbidly obese. I was 250 pounds on a frame of 5'6", and I decided to make a change in my life. And that change really involved really embracing and really truly understanding what healthy lifestyle is all about. I will comment and say that what we're taught is healthy lifestyle from more mainstream sources is not necessarily, I think, what equates to true health. So I've really dedicated a large part of my academic career towards focusing in on helping people realize what really truly is healthy lifestyle, and have had a lot of success in my local practice about bringing people to a new lifestyle that not only reduces the weight on the scale, but more importantly, and I think the big focus is that they have happier, more satisfying lives. So a lot of times when patients will come into me, I'll talk about the 4 pillars of health, and we really focus on these, not just, one at a time, but all together. The first one is nutrition. I feel like that is the biggest emphasis of what needs to have our attention be paid towards, because we're fueling our bodies multiple times a day. And what we're going to be discussing today is that stuff is just that we're usually putting in our mouths is not good for us. So number 1 is nutrition. The second pillar is activity. What are you doing for regular intentional exercise? Hey, I have the busy job. That doesn't cut the mustard. That's not really high quality exercise. And so you don't see as many benefits health-wise from unintentional activity. So we really focus on helping people understand what is good exercise. Also looking at the third pillar, which is emotional well-being. And these pillars are not independent of each other. They're so highly tied to each other. But really, what are you doing for emotional well-being? What are you doing to fill your cup? And then number 4 is sleep. And really, sleep is, I think I need to do a show entirely on just the benefits of sleep and how it really impacts us in our daily function. So in today's discussion on food politics, one of the things that I want to start out with right away is how big is this problem when we start talking about junk food? Because junk food just isn't, in my opinion, the Snickers bars that you're going to see at the checkout counter that are directly marketed to your children mostly, but also looking at like how prevalent is this problem, and why is it not only the person's problem that's dealing with the health issues, but why it's your problem as well. So I have some interesting statistics here, and it's just, I've heard these before, but it's just so sobering when you hear them again, and I want to share some of them with you. It's estimated that as much as 80% of all of our healthcare dollars are spent on the treatments of conditions that are preventable. 80%. And if they're preventable, that means that we could be doing more in the job of physicians focusing on preventative medicine, like with what I'm doing in my practice, to help reduce healthcare expenditures. Well, why does reduced healthcare expenditures benefit you? Well, all of us pay things like Medicare tax. And if you're not familiar with how much you're actually spending on Medicare, let me give you some statistics. So according to Medicare, healthcare expenditures in the United States were nearly, and this is back in 2010, it's gone up since then. Back in 2010, our Medicare healthcare expenditures were 2.6 trillion. We're not talking billion, we're talking trillions of dollars. And on average, that worked out to be $8,402 per person. So if you think that, this person's living unhealthy or I'm living unhealthy and it's not really, it's not my problem, it is your problem. This is a societal problem. And one of the points I want to make today is that I'm trying to not only ask us to have individual responsibility for our health, but I'm also asking us as a society and as a community to come together and really focus on this problem of poor nutrition that's feeding into this healthcare crisis. Other statistics that I was completely bowled over by: the rates of type 2 diabetes increased 22% amongst US adults from 1999 to 2008. In the span of 10 years, 22%, and that is an exponential curve going up. Current trends suggest that 1 in 3 children born after 2000 will receive a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. 1 in 3 children, that's 33%. So every 1 in 3 children will actually have type 2 diabetes. Other statistics, when we're looking at nearly 1/2 of all American population, by the year 2030, nearly half of them will be obese and diagnosed as such. And we're going to take a quick break here to update on a current situation that's going on here in Chattanooga.
Yeah, we just got a report now. We're going to go over to our correspondent on the ground right now over Zillow. Correspondent?
Hey, Russell, it's Confederate Mike, and so far the information we have, and we do have some conflicting stories. At about 10:25 this morning, it was a 911 call that there were at least 2 shots fired near or at the Naval Reserve recruiting station on Amacola Highway. That was the scene of the shooting and the death of 5 U.S. servicemen July 16th of this year. So, of course, police are going to respond immediately. There are about 30 squad cars there. There's sniper teams there. The chief of police has said that there is no active shooter at this time, but as you and I know, that if someone's dead, they're not an active shooter. So we're still not sure whether or not this was a fraudulent emergency call. Chattanooga State locked down at 10:25 when the call came in. We'll give you further details as they become available. Broadcasting live, we'll be from Amacola Highway. It's Confederate Mike at live on Hot News Talk Radio.
I just want to continue on with that real briefly. The CPD tweeted that there is currently no active shooter, and the report was that it was an auditory witness, so there's no visual confirmation, singular sound of 1 gunshot. But Details are fuzzy in the beginning, of course. We'll keep you updated here on Hot News Talk Radio. And Dr. Mitchell, it's your show now.
All right. Thanks for the update, Russell. So going back to the statistics on junk food and how this is impacting our overall healthcare of the nation and also having an impact, I think, worldwide, is looking at what is going into our diet. So a few more of these statistics. When we look at the standard American diet, one statistic I saw quoted was 63% of our diet is made up of refined and processed foods. And I would even argue, in my experience, I think it's even higher. It really depends on what region in the United States that you live in. And I really think that the South, we are right smack in the middle of what I call junk food central. There is a lot of junk food manufacturing that goes on here. And it happens to correlate with the fact that the South is also the obesity belt, the stroke belt, the heart attack belt. So I really do think that these things they're not siloed from one another. I really think that there is direct correlation going on here. When you think about junk food really isn't just thinking about like that's the Snickers bars and that's, the soda. And it's not only that, it's what I consider to be empty calories. So junk food is processed food, and processed food has most of its nutritional content stripped from it. The way I explain it to patients is when I encourage them, I want you to eat a real food diet. They look at me like, what do you mean real food? Well, real food is not necessarily the pasta and spaghetti sauce that you cook at home. That's a home-cooked meal, but that's not a healthy home-cooked meal. Boxes of pasta, they don't grow on trees. If you were to see a package of sandwich meat, you wouldn't know what it was unless it had a label on it. But you might recognize that's the steak that was cut from the cow. That's the chicken breast that was slaughtered from the chicken. That's really what I'm trying to get people to go back to. So real food is pretty much like unadulterated. When you cook it, yes, it is losing some of its nutritional content, but it's the things that get added to it. And then if it's being shipped to a store to sit on a shelf, you can bet your bottom dollar that the nutritional content is going to be way less if it's got a very long expiration date. So other things about our standard diet here in America, 25% of it is animal-based products, meaning meat, dairy, and eggs. And there's a lot of controversy in this area about how that impacts cholesterol. I will also say that sugar has an impact on your cholesterol profile. We used to think back, this trend really started in the 70s with the low-fat diet. And one of the worst things, in my opinion, that happened to the American diet, because when you see low-fat products on the shelf in the store, that's code for high sugar. Well, when you look at metabolic profiles of people who are consuming high sugar diets, they have a pretty nasty metabolic profile. In particular, their triglyceride levels are usually up off the charts. And that's because sugar does have an impact on all of these things that we're talking about. As little as 12% of our diet is made up of plant-based foods. That's the real food. So 12% of your diet is coming from real food. And when we look at that 12%, 6% of that, so half of that 12% is coming from French fries, which is, I can't even begin to express my disappointment with that. So really only a paltry 6% of our daily caloric intake is coming from plant-based. And one of the things I advocate for is we need to be increasing our plant-based in our diet. So when you sit down at the dinner table or you're having lunch or even breakfast, half of that plate really needs to be coming from plant-based. You need to be seeing half of it vegetables. I do want people eating fruit, but I really want more vegetable base in there. I want more healthy fats, the anti-inflammatory fats, your nuts, your seeds, your cold water fish. When we talk about beef, I really want to see, and chicken, I want to see free range. I want to see grass-fed. I want to see those animals raised in the environment that they were meant to be raised in, not inside a feedlot, not inside a crowded barn, fed all these growth hormones and antibiotics. I want to see people eating real food raised in the way, in Mother Nature, the way it was intended. Looking at how much sugars and sweeteners are we consuming in a year on the average standard American diet, we're consuming an average of 185 pounds 185 pounds in a year per person. That's pretty high. When you look at the WHO's criteria for the standard recommended intake of sugar, for guys, it's no more than 36 grams in a day. And for women, it's no more than 27 grams a day. Look at your can of soda, ladies and gentlemen. An average can of soda has 32 grams of sugar. You've almost exceeded your daily sugar intake at that point. So start reading those food labels. Start looking at the ingredients list. The ingredients list have your list of ingredients in their order of proportions that they appear in the product. And if you see sugar making an appearance, especially in the top 3 ingredients, you're eating sugar, just sugar. Over 80% of all foods sold in grocery stores have added sugar to them for no other reason other than trying to increase taste and add addiction to it. So stay tuned here on AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The second segment, we're going to get into more food politics and why you need to be paying attention to what's going in your mouth. Find us on live stream at www.hotnewstalkradio.com or on Facebook and Twitter, and join in here, listen live, call in. The number is 423-800-8949. We'll be right back here in a few minutes.
Compass Media Network's coverage of the NFL. Hi, this is Jerry Recco. Join Kevin Ray, Danny White, and myself for all the action.
Hot News Talk 1240.
If it's the NFL, it's right here.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Tired of insurance companies? Tired of doctors that won't spend time with you? Do something different. Leave the sick care model of medicine and come to Dr. Danielle Mitchell, the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health, where we're interested in long-term health solutions, not the quick fixes. Come see me, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, at the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. I'm all about the long-term healthcare solutions and doing what's best. On the web, you can find me at ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. That's ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Or call us at 875-1005, 875-1005, or find us on social media, Facebook, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, or the ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Let's go, ya!
Hey, all you gun enthusiasts! Carter Shooting Supply has just bought a crazy load of guns and is having a crazy huge sale event. Going on now, a huge inventory of Smith & Wesson, Glock, Ruger, and Taurus, all on sale. Taurus guns have a mail-in rebate for $25 to $50. All long guns and all ammo on sale, too, just in time for hunting season. Come in and take advantage of this crazy huge sale event. Going on now at Carter Shooting Supply, or shop from home by going to cartershootingsupply.com. Highway 58, Harrison. Check our prices before you buy.
Are you tired of working in corporate America, or have you recently lost your job and would like to consider owning your own business? If you are, please call me, as I can help you look at franchises or business opportunities that fit you, the economy that we're in, and the type of businesses that are right in the greater Chattanooga area. After I help my clients find the right opportunity, I also help them find the best way to finance the business, including paying yourself through the startup phase. If you would like to learn more about opportunities that may be right for you, please call me for a free assessment. My name is Bruce Krebs at the Entrepreneur Source. Phone number is 423-875-5621.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Good afternoon, Chattanooga. You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. This is Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and this doc is in the house. Today's radio broadcast is going to be talking about food politics and why you should be paying attention to what you're putting in your mouth and also what your family's putting into your mouth. On food politics, it's a huge problem. We're talking about how just the problem with like junk food and how readily available it is to our not only our kids, but when you go out in public. And so today's discussion is really going in depth on looking at how we can make the situation better. So on our last segment here, we were talking in particular about the statistics. And I think a lot of times people kind of glaze over when they start reading on statistics. But when you think about how those statistics really impact your bottom line, meaning like they impact your paycheck. And when we're paying over $8,500, almost $8,500, it's probably more than that now with current statistics per person when we're looking at Medicare costs. There's really, I think, a big, huge problem that's going on in terms of spending, and spending at $2.6 trillion in 2010 for Medicare costs alone. That is a lot. So to finish out, basically looking at the statistics with regards to food politics, I want to tell you guys and start asking the question, how big is this problem? Well, it's a big problem financially, but then we also, I think, have to think about how these trends are feeding into profits of companies that are producing a lot of these junk food, or a lot of this junk food. So I remember actually seeing a graph of looking at how these statistics really just visually can impact people. And the graph was basically showing what the percentage of food consumption was according to, were you eating out at a fast food restaurant, were you eating out just in particular, and were you eating at home? And what the information on the graph was depicting is that pretty much we're, I think, approaching about 60% of all people now eat most of their meals out of the home, which means that people aren't cooking. And I think there's a lot of reasons that we'll get into here in a minute as to why people aren't cooking. But also looking at what those food sources are when they do eat out. So over 60% of people are eating outside of the home now. And when you break that down, the vast majority of that is actually happening at, it's about a split between fast food restaurants and looking at sit-down restaurants. Now, fast food restaurants, I really want to put a lot of pressure there on people about thinking, if you're calling it fast food, that's not food, in my opinion. That's just empty, bankrupt calories, no nutritional density. Some fast food places have tried to put more healthier items on their menus, which I really applaud them for. I think that healthy, real food needs to be readily available to the public. And I will say, I think that there's a very nice grassroots effort that's happening where we're seeing convenience items that employ giving or having a readily available source of real food, having basically vendors that are offering that. We are actually starting to see an increase in those. And I think it's a supply versus demand. I think more people are starting to wake up to how much junk food really is a problem in our society. And so now we're starting to see vending machines that have real food in them. Actually finding a banana in a vending machine, finding a vending machine that has water only in it. Really interesting, I think, political maneuver, talking about vending machines and conflict of interest. If you walk into your healthcare clinic and you see a soda vending machine in the waiting room, you really need to be questioning, is healthcare the forefront and priority of that clinic? Because that is, in my opinion, just a gross hypocrisy. You walk into a waiting room and, sorry, Mr. Jones, your doctor's running 2 hours behind, but why don't you go help yourself to a soda in the vending machine while, you're waiting to have your diabetic exam? That's just not okay. It's not okay that we're walking into hospitals and the cafeterias and we see fast food chain, fast food chain, fast food chain. It's not okay. We need to be sending a better message from a corporate level that if we're really prioritizing health, then we need to put health first and not profit, and make it inexpensive for people to access, or more affordable for people to access, healthy food. So something to think about when you're walking into the hospital cafeteria the next time. What do you see out there for vendors? What do you see out there for food selections? And what is it costing? And leave feedback. That's the other thing. Change does not happen without people leaving feedback. Try to be constructive about it. What is the potential solution for it? Because people do, in particular, I think, have a voice. And the more people who speak up about it, you have that opportunity to change the situation. So getting back to how big is the problem, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a food advocate who I've followed over the years, and his name is Jamie Oliver. Some of you may be familiar with him. He is a chef by training, and he's a British chef, and he this last year actually had, we're going to actually break here for just a minute.
Authorities trying once again to evaluate information from the damaged voice recorder of the Russian plane that crashed in Egypt. Meanwhile, another Russian plane crashed, leaving dozens dead in Sudan.
The aircraft was reportedly overloaded when it crashed along the banks of the Nile River shortly after taking off from the capital of Juba.
Fox's Jessica Gallagher. Director Quentin Tarantino finally responding to the police calling for a boycott of his movies, telling the LA Times,
"I'm not being intimidated. Frankly, it feels lousy to have a bunch of police mouthpieces call me a cop hater. I'm not a cop hater. New York, Los Angeles, and Philly are among the unions that called for the boycott. Los Angeles Police Department Lieutenant Craig Lawley says that when Tarantino called specific police officers murderers 4 days after a New York officer was killed, he showed a stunning lack of sensitivity."
Fox's Michelle Polino. Fox News, we report. You decide.
You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. This is Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and this doc is in the house. So we apologize there for the break in the segment. I want to get right back to discussion on Jamie Oliver, because he's done some really great work with regards to how people are not interacting with their food anymore. We're so far removed from our food sources that, we're just used to basically, a lot of us go to the fast food restaurant, a lot of us go to the restaurant, very few of us are cooking now. And he really demonstrated, I think, in a very groundbreaking way as to how much of an issue this is. So Jamie Oliver, I'm not sure if you guys had seen this show, but he basically had a show, I believe it was on NBC, called Food Revolution. And Food Revolution essentially was about educating people about how important food is, and not only about the importance of food and bringing it obviously into your home to then consume it, but how it impacts health. So on one of his segments, he actually went into, I believe it was a second or third grade classroom, and he brought fresh produce with him. And this was very easily identifiable fresh produce. So you would, if you're accustomed to seeing food, you would recognize that those were tomatoes on the vine. You would recognize that he brought broccoli, he brought carrots, he brought potatoes. And his only job that day was to sit down with the kids and ask them to identify what the fresh food product was that he was showing them. So, and I actually showed a clip of this during a previous lecture of mine on food. And lo and behold, none of the kids in this classroom could identify things that were simple as tomatoes. They could not identify broccoli. They could not identify potatoes. They could not identify pretty much any of them. And the audience's initial response at first when I showed it was, one kid, you hold up tomatoes and one kid answers ketchup. Okay, so they can identify a processed food product with it, but they don't recognize that that's where the real food source came from and that that's the healthier source. And it was, laughs at first, but then as the segment played on and they saw how many kids could not identify a real food, basically a fruit or a vegetable placed in front of them, it really did, I think, illustrate a wonderful point that we are so far removed from real food sources in our homes that even our children are not able to identify real food sources. So if we're raising kiddos, or we have generations of people who have been raised without having a real true connection to their food supply, then we have kiddos that are being raised that are even further removed from having any connection to their food supply. So looking now at the school system and what's happening there, okay, so this is a big problem. One of the trends that we've seen, I believe probably over the last decade or more, is that programs that are considered, less important, which I would argue they are not less important, but things like home economics. Home economics, I believe, has been cut from a lot of public school programs, and things like physical education, those have also been cut from school and public funding. And so what are we doing? Well, we're essentially getting rid of teaching kids how to be able to cook. And whether or not, home economics, I think a lot of us think like, oh, well, that was the Betty Crocker class. it wasn't just the Betty Crocker class. It was actually giving us a skill set that we could then go on and be comfortable, at least in a kitchen, and know what to do with stuff in there. When I talk to my patients in my practice and I ask, like, especially when we get, people who are consuming high amounts of processed foods, they don't really know anything else other than maybe how to operate a microwave. And I think this is really concerning, and this gets back to a bigger issue. So one of the possible solutions that I would offer up is that we need to be thinking about in our school system, of all the issues that are going on there. I think we really need to be putting more focus and attention on bringing back things like home economics, paying teachers, obviously, for what their worth is, one of the most valuable professions, I think, in our community, and being able to instill and empower them with the idea that we're teaching future generations not only a skill set, but we're also investing in the health of our community. The other thing that I see as a big problem in the school system is looking at school lunches, because this is role modeling that's going on, right? And a lot of people will jump on the bandwagon very quickly and be like, oh my gosh, school lunches in the United States are disgusting. Like, I won't even let my kid, eat school lunch. Well, I want to back up there a little bit. When you're substituting and giving your child a Lunchable, that's not a healthy substitution at all. So I want to come about this in a very constructive way and suggest that we start putting more funding aside for looking at how we can, have better access to food in our school systems. One of the documentaries I would suggest that you guys watch if you have the time or make the time for, because it's well worth it, is a documentary that's called Fed Up, FEDUP. And Sonia Sochik and Katie Couric basically went out to document what was going on with sugar consumption and related it to healthcare crises such as pediatric diabetes and the obesity epidemic that's happening in our nation. And in that interview, they looked at sugar consumption and how prevalent it is in our schools, and how things like, ketchup is being listed as a vegetable on school lunch menus. And that's not okay. Ketchup is not a real food item. It's basically, when you look at the contents and the ingredients list, I encourage you guys to go and look at this. Water is the first ingredient on ketchup, and the second, depending on what brand you buy, is usually high fructose corn syrup. And then tomato puree is listed somewhere down the line. So you're really actually consuming sugar water when you're having ketchup, which is pretty sobering for people when they haven't actually looked at that ingredients list. Even more, I think, concerning is that we have school officials who are classifying things like ketchup as a vegetable, and it's not. So we really need to change. We need to shift the paradigm in thinking. We need to have more funding, like you said, set aside, and more education in teaching people about this connection to your food and being able to prepare it in a way that is healthy and that is sustainable and affordable and help actually have cost savings for your family as well. Eating out is very expensive. And a lot of times people argue the cost of food is also expensive if you're trying to eat, let's say, organic, but just cooking real food, that is actually a cost savings for family typically. We're going to break for a minute, and Russell's going to give us an update on the situation on Amnicola.
Hi, this is Russell Stroud, the news director. We're going to go on the ground to our correspondent on the ground, Confederate Mike. Are you there? And we have a correspondent on the ground right now. We're having a problem with his cell phone. He's coming in over Zello, which is a cell phone technology. There he is.
We're at the Naval Operations Support Center and Marine Reserve Center on Amnicola Highway. I counted 30 vehicles. That is 30 police vehicles and 2 police motorcycles responding to the scene, along with a fire truck and an ambulance. There's got to be at least, I'd say, 50 or 60 personnel here on Amnicola Highway at the Naval Operations Support Center. Everything started at about 10:25 this morning, and there was a call that they suspected 2 shots fired. According to Chief Fletcher, there are no active shooters. Now, we have to think in terms of police speak. Someone could be dead, and once they're dead, they're not an active shooter. Remember, they didn't say there were no suspects. They didn't say someone was in custody. They didn't say there was no shooting. All they said was there was no active shooter. And I assume by that there may have been an active shooter and he's dead, or maybe there wasn't an active shooter. They're not releasing all the details right now. Chat State right now is under lockdown. There is one police officer at the entrance of Chat State, so if you intend to attend class later today, I would check on that. But right now I'm at the River Park Robinson Bridge entrance, and there's about 30 police vehicles, at least 2 police motorcycles with a fire truck and an ambulance just standing by. So this may have been a false call. It may not have been, but at this point, I don't believe we can take chances based on the fact that May 16th, 5 naval personnel died here at the Naval Operational Support Center, especially due to the fact that these individuals are still unarmed after the shooting. They still are not allowed to have their personal sidearms. That said, we will keep you posted and follow up with further details as they become available here at Hot News Talk Radio. Confederate Mike broadcasting live from the Naval Operational Support Center, Marine Corps Reserve Center in Chattanooga on Emmacola Highway.
All right, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, we'll go back to you after all that. And you've actually got a break in about 15 seconds, too.
Yeah, so stay tuned. You guys here in about a few minutes, we're actually going to continue our discussion on junk food and food politics, why junk food is so prevalent in our society, and the healthcare ramifications from that. In case you forgot, you're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Catch us on live stream at www.hotnewstalkradio.com. You can also catch us on Facebook as well as Twitter. Feel free to call in. We're taking live calls during our segment. The number is 423-800-8949, and I'll field questions with regards to the topic of discussion today, which is food politics. What are you putting in your mouth?
And some fog will sort out your Wednesday, but a mainly dry and warm afternoon expected again. Highs lower 70s tonight. Lows only 60 to 64. Some more late fog. Could see a spotty shower or two, more likely later Friday. Glass Farm Nursery, the largest pansy supplier around, still has a huge selection of pansies and violas, still only $12.99 a flat, as well as small and large mums at Glass Farm, Highway 11, 4 miles south of Trenton. And I'm WDEF News 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Ward. On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
President Obama makes Jimmy Carter look like Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a president that leads from behind, and when America doesn't lead, bad things happen.
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Saudi Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead. 622-3156.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Good afternoon, Chattanooga. You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, and this is Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and this doc is in the house. On today's show, we're going to be talking about food politics, and in particular, what are you putting into your mouth? What are the politics behind that food you're putting into your mouth, and how you can make healthy changes for a better, healthier, happier life. So if you want to call in, the number here for live calls, 423-800-8949. Join us on live stream at www.hotnewstalkradio.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter as well. So we've been talking today about food politics and what is actually going on to contribute to some of our big healthcare crises, which are, I would argue, a pandemic of obesity. We have a litany of diagnoses that fall under that: type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, heart disease, cancer, neurological dysfunction. There is a whole bunch of stuff, I think, that can be related to what we're putting in our mouth. And what we put in our mouth is heavily influenced, I think, by what's going on outside of our homes and inside of our homes. So we spent some time talking about what's going on, I think, in schools and how we're removing skill sets from people, particularly our youth, and they're not able to cook. And so now we have generations that are produced without basically being able to be taught how to cook. And that's now, I think, infiltrating down to massive and increasing consumptions of processed foods, mainly from eating out at restaurants and fast food companies. So I also want to draw attention here when you start thinking about how this increasing consumption of junk food is happening, is start looking around at sponsorships, because sponsorships and the marketing that comes from them, I think, also heavily influence our decisions on what we're buying from, for our food supply in our home. So I want to draw attention to, even here in our own community, when we start looking at, take for example, athletic events that are sponsored by junk food companies. A couple years ago, I did express my opinion about a local event here, a very big event. You guys may know about it. It's Ironman. It is sponsored by a local-based company here who is a junk food producer. And before we get into the politics here about attacking people on a personal level, because I took a lot of heat for putting my opinion out there, and I stand by my opinion hard and fast. I think that the company that chose to sponsor Ironman, I love the fact that they treat their employees well. I have never contested that. I dispute the fact that they're putting unhealthy products out there and they're pairing them with an athletic endeavor to get readily available marketability for their products. Their name is out there now with a health related event. And B, now when other people look at athletes in that event, it actually tries to legitimize junk food, which is not okay. It is not a good fuel source. It is not a good athletic fuel source. So when we start accepting money into our community and into our programs without questioning what is the message behind that company. You can put out there that somebody is a local family bakery, but really, this is something, if you're supporting the company because they're a great employer, that's one thing. But I would argue to you, when I came to the area, I didn't even know that company existed here, and I didn't know that it was a great employer. I saw it as, whoa, I recognize that that's a junk food company. And I would argue to you that the vast majority of people, when they see that company's name and logo out there, they recognize it for its product, not for its employee or employer values. And that's the vast majority of people, I think, who would identify they recognize it for their product, not for their policies, for employer policies, I should say. I also want you to think about, what are you seeing when you go to the sports parks? What are you seeing when you drive down the road? A lot of it is like, think about what goes onto billboards. Think about what goes onto primetime television commercials. It's all basically, I very rarely watch TV anyway, because I feel like it's a prescription for you to live your life according to somebody else's idea. But it's usually, you're being sold prescription medicines, foods that are not healthy for you. They're not even qualifying as foods, in my opinion. And that's time spent on the couch that you could be out doing other productive things with your lives. So when you go to the sports field, for example, and you see that the team is sponsored by like a junk food company, when you see that the sideline products that the team is fueling on is nothing but high fructose water, that really is not, I think, a good example that we're setting out there for our kids. And so I'd like to, I guess my point about it would be to say, let's start questioning some of these contribution sources, because though it is technically free money, not all things that are free are good things. So we really want to uphold the mission of what that community program might be about, and try and do it in a healthy way that's constructive, not something that I think we're sabotaging our own health and also our own ideals at the same time. I also want to draw attention to, when we're talking about food politics, this is another thing that really, it has to deal with the spin factor. And this really goes into marketing tactics for especially larger companies. And I want to draw attention to what's happening right now with soda. So the sales of soda over pretty much steadily the last 2 to 3 years have been rapidly declining. Now, that's also been, if you look at other beverages that these companies make, particularly the energy drinks. And energy drinks, the only difference between regular soda and an energy drink is that you've got soda, which has caffeine and sugar, but then you've got energy drinks, which have pretty much double and sometimes triple the amount of energy or of soda as well as caffeine. Soda and caffeine are two addictive. I'm sorry, soda, which is sugar, and caffeine, two very addictive substances. Great research behind both of those as being addictive substances. And now we've actually increased the amounts those ingredients in energy drinks. And lo and behold, we're seeing a trend in increasing sales with those. I think from a company standpoint, and this is what I'm seeing, being a healthcare provider, I feel like those companies are trying to make up for the profit loss that's happening with decreasing soda sales, and particularly as people are starting to wake up to the ill effects of sugar consumption. Those companies now are doing spin advertising, which is essentially going out and spending. In one case, I want to draw attention to something that's called the Global Energy Network. And you're going to see, we're already starting to see these commercials and the advertising coming out. The Global Energy Network is it's basically a quote unquote research foundation that when you start looking at the small type, it's funded by Coca-Cola. And so it's not basically an unbiased research product that's being produced. You're never going to see research that comes out that is sponsored by a company that then goes against what the company is producing. So be aware of that. The Global Energy Network has basically hired a big gun epidemiologist to come out and say that there's absolutely no proof that excess sugar consumption has any ill health effects. This has gotten the community, the medical community in particular, in an uproar because, ladies and gentlemen, there is a litany of research out there that is unbiased, very good research to show the ill effects of sugar consumption. Just this last week alone, I want to draw attention to a study that the NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health, released on sugar consumption in children. And in particular, in this study, they did a withdrawal period and took added sugars out of the diets of a pediatric population. And they saw, just in 10 days, improvements in body weight, improvements in metabolic profiles, fasting blood sugars, and that was just in 10 days. So we really do see that there is wonderful evidence out there that you can remove a substance like sugar, essentially, from your diet and really experience very quickly some very positive health outcomes. So imagine the polar opposite now, where people are really chronically consuming these substances and what it's doing to your body over the longer period of time. Used to be, and we still, harp about smoking is bad for you. You don't want to be out there consuming, substances like illicit substances because they're bad and addictive. Well, guess what? Sugar is so prevalent in our society and we're consuming it at such large rates. Where's the attention to be paid to that? So one of the things that I want to talk about here in prioritizing your health is thinking about what are the ramifications. If you watch the documentary Fed Up, what you will learn is that our pediatric population right now is projected to live shorter lifespans than you and I. And that's directly related to the healthcare crisis that's going around surrounding the topic of obesity, pediatric diabetes, high cholesterol. I diagnose high cholesterol in kids now. So we really want to be thinking about what's the financial cost, but what's the emotional burden here? Our children are living shorter lives than you and I. That's a huge cost to us. Like emotionally, we should be involved with this. I also want to go and think about, this is a lot. I think, especially when you think about the emotional burden that comes from, being overweight, having been there, I've talked the talk and I walk the walk with regards to being overweight at one point in my life, and not only overweight, but obese. And, I deal on a daily basis in my practice with the people who are struggling, really struggling. And I'm the person who is there to hold the hand of the people who are in tears over what's happening in their life and they feel like they have no control over it. I'm the one who sees them in continuity over time to help them with the struggle. So I really want to draw attention. Like, this is, something that is so difficult for people to deal with. And I really want to have people take the judgment factor out of it, because you don't know the struggles of what other people are. And I would implore you to think about showing an ounce of compassion towards those people and help them. Role model yourself healthy lifestyle. What are some of the potential solutions? Well, this is where it gets really political, because this is not an easy thing to fix. The biggest thing I can tell people right now is, number one, eat real food. Get the processed junk food out. Get the boxes, the packages, the bottles, the cans, get them out of your house. Don't buy dessert items and bring them into your house. Really start focusing on real food. If you can't cook, think about taking a cooking class. Think about maybe going to restaurants that offer the food in its native state. I recognize that that's the salad with all the colors of the rainbow represented. I recognize that, oh my gosh, that's a grilled chicken breast that they put on there. And that's olive oil dressing and all these wonderful nuts and seeds on it. Like, you want to see the food in its unadulterated state, not something that you can't recognize. I want to think about supporting more locally based producers of food. So our farmers, in particular, the people who raise grass-fed, free-range animals, no antibiotics, no hormones added to that, because we are consuming those antibiotics and the hormones that they are giving to their livestock. We consume that impacts our health. And we'll get into that in later segments. I also want to think about this very controversial idea, and it's been raised in other cities as well, and thinking about a junk food tax. If you can remember, I think it may have been about 4 or 5 years ago, the mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, had introduced the idea of banning big gulps or having a junk food sales tax. And it came down to, I don't want the government telling me what I can and can't have. But this has gotten to such a big national healthcare crisis, and it's costing people their lives. It's costing people huge amounts of money. I think there needs to be some social responsibility that comes in here and steps in to say, you need to be more responsible with what you're doing with your lives, what you're putting into your mouth, and what you're role modeling to other people, because it does cost the system on a larger scale whenever people have bad health outcomes from chronically consuming these products. We have taxes on cigarettes. We have taxes on alcohol. We need to be thinking about having junk food taxes. And these junk food taxes, not only on an individual level, I would even argue we need to be having a junk food tax on corporations who are producing these products. When we think about how these companies come in and sponsor on a larger level, that's great. Like, the fact that they're going out there and they're building green spaces for people and they're, providing an environment that people can be more active in. I argue to you, it is their responsibility to do that. It is not something that is considered a gift. They are contributing a poor health product to the market that people are consuming, not always by choice, because these are addictive substances, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that create repeat customers. So I would really introduce the idea that maybe we should be thinking about taxing these companies for their products they're producing, because it's really creating and contributing to a bigger healthcare crisis that's costing all of us in our wallets at the end of the day. Other things to be thinking about for potential solutions, and this is probably the most important, is prioritizing yourself. You're worth it, and your family is worth it. And when we think about these 4 pillars of health, looking at nutrition, looking at activity, emotional well-being, sleep, emotional well-being, I think, is so dramatically important in this equation, and just really trying to help people realize and understand that, you're worth it. And we need to be able to change our paradigm. It doesn't happen overnight, but being able to say, you know what, I think I'm going to commit to this. I know a lot of people want it. There's no question out there in my mind. When I interview people in my clinic, I know people want it. I know they want to live healthier. They just need somebody there for them to help them make those stepping stones happen. And that's really where I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders. I tell my patients, you can make these changes. We just have to commit to it, not only on an individual level, but on a bigger societal level. I want to thank you guys so much for joining in today. You've been listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. This has been Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and this doc is in the house. If you want to hear the broadcast in its entirety, please feel free to go on to YouTube.
We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
WSDT Sunny Daisy, Chattanooga.
CBS News. I'm Steve Kathan. Authorities outside Chicago say the September shooting death of a police officer that triggered a huge manhunt was a carefully planned suicide. Live to CBS's Heather Bosch.
Investigators say evidence shows that Fox Lake Lieutenant Charles Glenowitz carefully staged a murder scene and then fatally shot himself. Why?
Glenowitz committed the ultimate betrayal to the citizens he served and the entire law enforcement community.
Commander George Falenko.
Glenowitz had been stealing and laundering money from the Fox Lake Police Explorer Post
for 7 years. Falenko says a trail of forged documents and electronic messages shows Glenowitz used thousands of dollars for everything from mortgage payments to adult websites. Falenko says 2 other people are also under investigation.
A new Quinnipiac University national poll of Republicans has Donald Trump and Ben Carson a point apart and leading the rest of the presidential field.
We have to take our jobs back from China, Japan, Mexico, all these places that have them. And Ben Carson is not equipped to do that. That I can tell you.
Trump, campaigning in New Hampshire, filed his formal paperwork for that state's first-in-the-nation